Morning Blues, and welcome to the first edition of this live morning show. We're kind of going a little bit raw at the moment, so please do let me know in the chat if you are watching, if you can hear me okay. We're going to be doing this once a week, and maybe on a Friday. It just depends usually on the day. I'll let you know in advance when we're doing this show. I've wanted to do a morning show for a very long time, and effectively what this is going to be is quite a relaxed show, talking about some Chelsea stuff mostly, because of course I am a Chelsea channel, a Chelsea show, but then also on top of that, talking about some non-Chelsea stuff on top of that as well. So hope you're having a good Friday. Happy Friday. And it's FA Cup third round weekend. Chelsea have got Preston, but there are some other interesting games. The first thing I want to really speak about is Cole Palmer, because I love talking about Cole Palmer because, as I said in yesterday's show, and if you haven't checked it out already, I did a breakdown show and we talked about the brilliance of Cole Palmer, the amazing stats he has currently at Chelsea, and sort of competing with Bukayo Saka and some of the debates that are going on. So if you haven't checked out my sort of breakdown of Chelsea tactics and all of that good stuff, please do let me know, and let me know in the chat as well, because I'm always slightly cautious because I don't do a lot of live shows. So I am always slightly cautious that there we go. I'm sorry if you heard echo there. I'm just my mic is working. But yeah, just in terms of his stats, and of course, player of the month, he's been nominated. Two things. For some reason, yesterday there was this massive thing around Taylor Swift and Cole Palmer, two names that I did not expect this season to be talking about in the same sentence. But, you know, here we are. It's 2024. And apparently Swifties are all over Cole Palmer and wanting to see him win Player of the Month. I'm not complaining if he does win Player of the Month. I think it's the first one we're going to have in a Premier League point of view for quite a while. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Eden Hazard was the last to win Player of the Month as a Chelsea player, which is just absolutely tragic. I might be wrong on that one, but I feel like I'm pretty certain that's true because it's just been so bad, especially in an attacking point of view. So you have a load of Swifties going out there and talking about how much of a fan now they are of Cole Palmer. And you don't, unfortunately, I know this quite personally. You don't mess with Swifties, and it's very likely he's going to win the public vote, because if they're just throwing it out on their Twitter, it's likely they are going to be supporting him and voting for him. But then also, I did see this reaction to Garth Crooks. I mean, a name that I don't really want to be bringing up on my show that regularly, but you sometimes you just hear an opinion and you're like, it just kind of sums up how bad a lot of mainstream punditry is. That it almost feels a little bit like a meme, right? At this point, Garth Crooks, he goes out there, he says pretty outlandish stuff. He has his team in the week, which doesn't really represent what's just happened. There is a part of it with some of these pundits where I do think they are kind of playing up to the crowd, playing to an act because it works and it gets reactions. And if you're just going off people reacting to you, I guess it's a success. But I mean, the quote he gave where he was effectively saying that Cole Palmer ducking out of challenges after the weekend he's just had at Chelsea, where he scores 2 goals. He's an influential player. This is his first kind of full proper season in the Premier League, and he's playing to this level. And that's your analysis. I mean, it's just it's beyond silly, and it doesn't. Again, I think it's why a lot of people who watch my channel, who watch other Chelsea channels, who watch other football channels, they just get sick and tired of sort of the mainstream analysis. And it's not trying to be all like conspiratorial or anything. It's just if that is the level of expert analysis you're getting from ex players. I mean, this is why a lot of people gravitate to other areas, because there is a roll of the eyes, and it's like, is this the best we can expect from punditry now? And unfortunately that's what it is. But we know the truth. We know that Cole Palmer is an amazing player. We know that he's very likely to win player of the month, and I'm intrigued to see this weekend what Pochettino does with the Chelsea team. Of course, I'm going to be doing my team selector later today, where I give you my preview of the game and my predicted 11. And I don't know. I do think that for me, it's like I'm curious to see a mixture of players. I think there is, because Chelsea, have the Middlesbrough game shortly after that, and it's an away game, and we want to get to Wembley. I do expect some rotation. And I also think it's a perfect opportunity to give the likes of Alfie Gilchrist, who's kind of top of my list of players I want to see in this game, a proper start in this game, because I think he deserves it. And then, on top of that, I think there probably is, for me, also a bit of Nkunku. I want to see him being given a chance. Can he feast against championship opposition, getting that fitness up? Enzo Fernandez has just returned from some problems of his own. So I do think it will be a blend. I don't think we're in quite a position where it's going to be so obviously a second team. I do think there will be some players that maybe you would consider, would you rest for this game? But then also there is that strategy, and there is that kind of absolute priority of the Carabao Cup semi-final. So I'm intrigued to see, because I think part of it is going to be an exercise in getting some players who haven't had a lot of football recently back up to speed. I wouldn't be surprised if Raheem Sterling starts against Preston, because of course he missed the game against Crystal Palace. I don't even think he came off the bench against Luton. Correct me if I'm wrong. So this is another guy who himself could be getting some football. But then we do have others. We will get back to a player who may feature, and I actually would like to see feature and would like to stay. Please do give the stream a like if you're watching. I know this is kind of an abnormal time for me to be posting. I'm also posting this on X. It is kind of the first edition of Morning Blues, and I will be posting this on my podcast feed as well after this. So if you want to go back and listen to it, you can. And please do get involved in the chat, share the stream around. I want to talk about Arteta, and I want to talk about Arsenal, because if things haven't been going well for them, I think it's an absolutely astonishing stat that Chelsea picked up more Premier League points than Arsenal in December, which is a stat that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, given how bad we felt after Man United, after Everton, and after Wolves. But when you actually look at the form of both teams, they have really tailed off. And listen, I think that Arsenal are still in a wildly better place than Chelsea. Arsenal are still likely going to finish top 3. But I feel that it's unlikely they're going to win the Premier League title, because when I watched them against Luton, and I know arguably, Chelsea had some problems against Luton, and, it all went quite dramatic. I just think from a title perspective, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And why I've been very steadfast on this, despite some analysis that I still think Man City will win the Premier League this season, is because at the end of the day, I just personally think that they have got the experience and the endurance over the course of a season. They've done it so many times. There's that muscle kind of memory of doing it. And it feels like early December, Arsenal are away to a team that they probably shouldn't be conceding 3 goals to, even though we know the threat of Luton, especially at Kenilworth Road. But then on top of that, it's kind of how dramatic things are already. And their performance levels, if you even speak to Arsenal fans, not that good. I mean, Chelsea should have beaten them earlier in the season. I've been watching them consistently. There haven't been many convincing wins. And the defeats to West Ham, where they were well beaten and then beaten against Fulham, and of course they lost to Aston Villa as well, kind of summarizes their problems. But really, the thing I want to bring up is the hypocrisy of Arteta, the hypocrisy of Arsenal that I have seen over the past couple of weeks. And it's to do with Premier League officiating. Now, if you watch my show, you know that I am very harsh on Premier League officials, and I think rightly so. The PGMOL, there was another disastrous moment last night in the Crystal Palace Everton game. I'm surprised I'm still not asleep after that game, to be honest, given how absolutely bad it was. But the only thing noteworthy in that FA Cup game was this dreadful VAR review that was a red card that should have never been a red card. And it sums up kind of the inconsistency. If you think back earlier in the season, Destiny Godoy against Raheem Sterling, where he goes 2-footed, that isn't given as a red card. Romero, I mean, I'm just going from a Chelsea perspective here, but you think about that not being given as a red card, the Malo Gusto one being given as a red card, this one, it is just the inconsistency of Premier League officials is not something you're going to find me arguing about. My frustration is that I said this on 90 Min, a show where I was speaking with Harry Simew, who's an Arsenal podcaster, Scott Saunders, who's Man United. And, I think my personal belief is that to get actual change in the Premier League, to get to a point where it's actually going to improve, you need a sense of humility from clubs to actually call out officiating consistently, not just when it negatively affects them. And unfortunately, Arsenal are very much now falling into a trap where, to me, and it's not surprising, I think Chelsea would be just as guilty of it. I would back most Premier League. Liverpool proved that they do this themselves with the replay nonsense earlier in the season. I personally am now of belief that it's just, if it affects us, it's bad officiating and it's a crime and it's a disaster, and Arteta needs to go out and say something, and Arsenal need to release the next statement about how they're victims and they're only victims of this. But then, of course, they have absolutely nothing to say when officiating goes in their favour. I mean, most notably, Martin Odegaard, his handball, his clear and obvious handball at Anfield, that probably should have cost Arsenal that game against Liverpool, where they didn't play that particularly well, to be honest. I mean, they probably should have lost the game anyway. But there was absolutely nothing, radio silence. And this week, it's all about Bukayo Saka not being protected by officials. Now, I agree with the sentiment that players like Saka probably aren't protected by officials and players of his ilk, but he's not abnormal to that. I mean, we always remember Eden Hazard, the amount of time Eden would just get absolutely clobbered in games. If you're a player of Saka's ilk, if you're a player that is dealing with that, you kind of have to understand that you're going to get some rough treatment. But again, it's like, number one, if I'm Mikel Arteta, why aren't you resting Saka a little bit more? I think he's been absolutely overworked and overplayed this season. But number two, again, he would have nothing to say about other players in the Premier League of a similar stature getting fouled. So I think at this point, the game is kind of quite clear. And I think Arsenal fans, similarly, that I follow on social media, who absolutely, radio silence when any officiating goes in their favour. But of course, the campaigns are out. And listen, we're all hypocrites, right? Because we obviously prioritize our own club. But to me, it is something that I just find a little bit funny. And I don't think anything major is ever going to change until clubs put their own priority behind them on this issue and actually call out just a general wide problem that is so obvious to see that needs to be rectified. It just isn't. Moving on to Chelsea and Andre Santos. I want to speak a little bit about Andre Santos, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this because I didn't get to talk about it. I maybe mentioned it, I think, on what was it, Wednesday's show, Let's Talk Chelsea, where we discussed some of the transfer dealings and loans, Alex Matos going on loan, and I think that kind of ties into Andre Santos. And sorry, I am going to keep on checking my audio because again streaming. But morning to Archie who's watching on my YouTube. I'm sorry on Twitter or X. You can also watch the show on X as well. I want to talk about Andre Santos because to me, I'm kind of this belief that I've seen a lot of discourse around him and should he be loaned out again? The loan to Nottingham Forest was a complete disaster. And I think on twofold. I mean, sure, we can get annoyed at Nottingham Forest. We can get annoyed at any club that takes one of our players. And I mean, any loan, right? You just don't play the player. What was the point? And it's a complete waste of half a season for what is a very talented young midfielder who I think has excited a lot of us. I think it was nice seeing him a little bit in pre-season. And there's really a belief that his trajectory is going like that. And actually, we could get him to a point where he's going to be a first teamer. So then what do you do now? You've brought him back. Nottingham Forest haven't played him at all. There's a real danger that this season becomes an absolute waste for him. And I guess I can understand the argument. There's probably equal threat of him if he stays at Chelsea. Is his development going to go up that much because he's just basically going to be a sporadic player compared to going out on loan somewhere and then maybe getting football? But then if you make another wrong loan, are you then left in an Ethan Ampadu situation, which is where we don't want to be? I've said this before, and when the Ampadu situation was unfolding in recent years, I'm not so. I understand that loans and where you send a player on loan is vital and important. I'm not going to say you just send them anywhere because it's all about context, right? It's all about the player. It's all about the period in their development. Again, I'm sorry to sound a little bit like Michael Owen here, but what is the main goal of a loan? It's to get these players football. And my concern with sending Andre Santos to a Crystal Palace who've been touted or another Premier League club that are going to be, because the level in the Premier League is going to be below mid-table. That's the reality of where Andre Santos is. He isn't going to be loaned to any club vying for European football, vying for a top 10 space, likely. And you are at a situation now in January where clubs are desperate. Chelsea know this, but especially those who are in realistic threat of getting relegated. They are desperate for instant impact. And I think in the summer, those sort of clubs like Nottingham Forest are more likely to have a punt on a player and to actually think, well, we'll actually maybe give this player a chance. I think in January, it's all about instant impact. It's all about a player that they have tangible evidence is going to come in and hopefully do a good job for them for the rest of this season. If their kind of main goal objective, like a Crystal Palace, like a Brentford, all those clubs below Chelsea, and hopefully it stays that way for the rest of the season, is just staying in the Premier League. And I'm not sure if that's the best place for someone like Andre Santos at the moment, which is why I'm always a big advocate of championship loans. Now, it's not that you don't have a similar situation in the championship where clubs are looking. It's just a general football thing, right? You go into the January window, you're really looking for an instant impact. Maybe something in the summer hasn't worked out. Maybe you're missing something that you didn't fix in the summer. Maybe you've got a massive injury crisis that you need to resolve in a position. But overall, for me, with Andre Santos, why I'd like to see him go to the championship and why I think Matos is going to benefit is that I think it's such a great league to get you those consistent minutes. Look at Cesare Casadei this season. Why I'm quite confident that Casadei is going to come back a better player is because he's playing week in, week out. He's playing for a good level of club. He's playing quality football. But then also, I think the intensity and the demands of championship football are just so good for players of that age. And I always bring this up and listen, maybe we just had a golden era, right, where we had very talented young players who it coincided with them going to the championship and listen, they would have made it whatever. But I look at Fikayo Tomori, Tammy Abraham, Mason Mount, Reece James. There are others, in terms of sending them on loan to the championship, them getting consistent minutes. And for some of those players like Mace, he didn't just go on loan to the championship. Of course, before that, he was at Vitesse Arnhem. So I'm not sort of like, it has to be the championship or nothing. But I do think that a Premier League loan might not be the best thing for him. And I guess the question I'd ask to you is, are we just wanting to send him out on loan because it's kind of prestige and, cool. And that probably it's easier to watch Andre Santos for the rest of the season compared to sending him to a championship club that maybe isn't as kind of trendy, but actually gets him that minutes. Where if Santos, for me, I'm quite confident that Matos going to Huddersfield is going to get that development time and he's going to get a lot of minutes to play probably. And if we get to the summer and Santos hasn't really got many more minutes, whether that's at Chelsea or we send him out on loan to another Premier League club, where is that development going to be? And I think that it's very important if Chelsea really value Andre Santos to get this next move right, because what you don't want is a couple of loans back to back that haven't really improved him as a player, haven't given him a real understanding of English football. And people kind of roll their eyes about the English football thing, but I think it is very realistic that English football is slightly different, and it's about getting those minutes in the legs. It's about adapting to the physicality. It's about getting those reps in consistently where you can go up and down as a player, that all of the other young players that we've seen thrive in the Championship. And why Huddersfield? Huddersfield is not the most trendy club, but they have got a really good track record. I mentioned this on Wednesday's show. Ben Chilwell went there when he was at Leicester and had a good loan spell. Emile Smith-Rowe went there before he broke into the Arsenal first team. Levi Colwell, Trevor Chalobah. There's, to me, and listen, I don't disagree with that comment that Santos may have a higher ceilings hypothetically in the future than Enzo Fernandez. What a wonderful situation that could turn out to be for Chelsea. But I am of the belief that at the current moment, if Chelsea are only open to Premier League loans, I'd prefer to keep Andre Santos. Now, Chelsea have to make this decision pretty quickly, because apparently if Santos plays against Preston, he can no longer go on loan for the rest of the season. Now, as I say, based on the evidence we have in front of us right now and all the rumours that it's going to be another Premier League loan, I'm personally of the belief that I just keep Santos, play him in the FA Cup. Hopefully we progress enough where that's going to give him enough games. And, maybe he gets a few bench appearances and gets off as a substitute at times. And then we know with our injury problems, right, that there may open up a door where he actually gets more minutes than we expect. So I'm of that belief currently, because I just personally wouldn't like to see a situation where a player like Santos, who clearly has good attributes that we were excited about this time last year, goes away again, gets in the wilderness, and we're sat here in the summer where we've just wasted a season for this very talented player who could have been further along in his development. And it's all about finding those internal solutions, because Santos is one of these players that we've invested in as a young player. You need to start making it so he returns to Chelsea and we actually get the benefit of watching him in the Chelsea first team. So that's my belief. And maybe we see him tomorrow, and that's a good position and platform for him to impress, right? And I think there are a lot of attributes about Casadei, about Santos that I like as a player, that I'd like to see develop. And whether you agree, disagree, because I do think there is a part of it where it's like, let's just send him out on loan to a Premier League club because there's kind of like this, it's more trendy, it's more prestige, and we know the clubs quite well, so there's going to be more excitement. But is that actually beneficial for the player? I think the difference with, say, a Conor Gallagher going to Crystal Palace, people may forget that, he went on loan to Charlton, he went on loan to Swansea. There was background there, and he'd already had substantial minutes in English football at a decent level before making the move to Crystal Palace. So I think for as well, Crystal Palace, there's probably a lot of evidence already, not just that he came from Chelsea's academy, but then also we'd seen him have decent minutes and impact things at a similar or like decent level. I think the Championship is probably a really good ground for that. And that's why maybe Palace felt confident, and why Conor Gallagher went in there, got those minutes, and really developed quite rapidly over the course of a season. So that's kind of my personal belief at the moment. I think in terms of, I will give you my predicted 11. Hopefully we don't get any nasty injury surprises. I guess two other things here that I want to use this show as well to kind of cover things that I won't cover in other shows. The crypto stuff, Chelsea have agreed a deal with, is it Bing X to be the new sleeve sponsor? And listen, we discussed this in the summer when Stake were potentially going to be Chelsea's sponsor, and I rallied against it because I just thought it'd be absolutely disastrous. That was on the betting front, but we are talking in similar murky grounds here, and I think Chelsea Youth and others, I'm trying to think who else that I retweeted, have also pointed this out, that it kind of contradicts a little bit what Chelsea's kind of values are. Am I entirely surprised? I mean, the Premier League are very much on a crypto trend at the moment. Football is. I mean, it's not, Chelsea are not going out of their way to be different here with this sponsorship, and the new ownership knows that probably sponsorship has to come in at some point. especially in the sleeve aspect, in the main sponsorship. What will Infinite Athlete be for Chelsea in the long term? Because we all had that kind of debate over the summer. What was going to be the shirt sponsor? Eventually, it was Infinite Athlete. I'm just not the biggest fan of it personally, and I don't, I don't personally think that, if we consider clubs a valuable part of their community, if you consider clubs something that they should represent a little bit more and they should consider what the implications of getting sponsorship means, then I think it is relevant. I mean, I know there are some people who are very kind of cynical about this and it's just, or just, indifferent to it, right? It doesn't really make a difference to me. But I personally, yeah, it's like if Chelsea then are getting criticized a few months down the line because a crypto company has maybe done something that is warranted of criticism, I don't think Chelsea fans can then turn around and go, "Oh, this is absolutely awful. Look at the campaign against Chelsea," because Chelsea kind of put themselves in a situation, and that was the same thing with Stake, right? I was like, you can't then turn around and get annoyed if Chelsea are under scrutiny for a company that has already got criticism, that already had articles, pretty extensive articles in the likes of The Guardian, kind of breaking down some of their practices that are worth criticizing. Um, I think the only other thing to kind of touch on is, for me, please do go and watch my show on Wednesday, because I gave you my extensive thoughts on what I think about Chelsea. And as someone pointed out there, Bin X, is it Bin X or Bing X? I can't believe it's actually Bing X, Bin X. Sorry, I did see it just going through my, yeah, Bing X, but yeah, Bin X is probably the more appropriate title. And just here, Orlando, that was the person I was referring to in terms of, do the right. If you go on Chelsea's website, there's a page talking about sort of values, and doing the right thing means providing support to our people, stakeholders and fans. At Chelsea Football Club, we foster a culture that empowers our people to take responsibility and lead by example to ensure the club's integrity is always maintained. And I don't personally think being X really goes into that, to be honest. But that's what it is, to be honest. And we have to deal with it, right? And that's what it is. So those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I'm intrigued to see what happens tomorrow. I will give you my preview. If you do like this format, if you do like a morning show, let me know, what would you like to see, maybe segments on this show. This is the first go at it, so we are kind of it is going to be a little bit raw. But I wanted to try this format, and as I say, I'm sure some of you are going to be going back and watching a little bit later, because I don't usually post this early. But let me know your thoughts. I hope you have an amazing day, amazing Friday. If you are watching on X, please do go over to my YouTube channel at SonOfChelsea and check out all of the content. We've done tactical breakdowns on Oni Manawake's improvement and Cole Palmer. We spoke about the recent news and what Chelsea's transfer priority should be in January. And then also on top of that, we spoke about Conor Gallagher, which is obviously such a big topic at the moment, positive, negative, all of that stuff. And then I will have my team selector later today, giving you my thoughts ahead of that game, FA Cup game against Preston tomorrow. So thank you so much for watching. Please do like the stream, share it around. It really does help out. And yeah, we will see you again very soon. All the best.